You're listening to Bold Hearts, Big Moves, the show for female entrepreneurs who want it all: a thriving business, deep self love, and fulfilling relationships. I'm Erin Anderson, and each week we will dive into how to set stronger boundaries, make empowered choices, and show up in life and business with boldness, authenticity, and heart. Because let's be real, the money you make is directly related to the love that you have for yourself and the strength of your relationships. So if you're ready to lead with love and make those big moves with those bold hearts, let's dive in.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Bold Hearts, Big Moves, the place where the female entrepreneur can be seen, heard, and understood. And today I really want to talk about 3 boundaries that you can set with difficult people in your life because let's face it, as female entrepreneurs, we definitely deal with difficult people, whether it be in our personal relationships and our professional relationships. Difficult people are just a part of the game, right? But instead of feeling guilty for speaking up or wondering if you're the problem or or second guessing yourself, today I really want to break it down into these 3 boundaries that you need in all of your relationships, really, whether they're personal, professional, somewhere in between, because I want you guys to find success in your relationships. Our business, our successes in any goal in life really does boil down to how we are able to navigate these relationships and the difficult conversations that come with them, right? So, we're going to talk about narcissists, we're going to talk about avoidance, and we're going to talk about how to tell the difference between the two so you don't spend your time trying to fix just what is not yours. Okay? So, let me talk about a time when I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells and everything I said was too much. Every boundary I set was met with blaming, gaslighting, etc. I've been there. I have been there, and it left me so incredibly emotionally exhausted, spiritually confused, mentally, emotionally confused. And I really wondered if something was wrong with me, maybe I'm not kind enough, maybe I'm not patient enough, maybe I'm not loving enough, or maybe I'm not deserving of it. That was really something that was going on in the background. But here's really kind of what it came down to. What I finally understood is that God didn't call me to be a doormat for someone else. He called me to be discerning. And you're not unloving for having boundaries. I'm not unloving for having boundaries. I'm wise. And as a matter of fact, the boundaries that I did finally end up setting, it took me some time, I'll be honest, but the boundaries I finally did end up setting were the best things, not only just for me, but for the person that I was setting them with. See, boundaries that are set in love and truth, when we love ourselves, we understand our intentions, and we trust it. We trust ourselves. We can see when we have maybe misstepped, or when maybe something we did was out of alignment with who we are, right? And we can own that. But what if somebody comes back and is like, "Oh, you're the worst person ever, blah blah blah," or you get attacked because you make a mistake, even though you're owning it? Well, we're going to get into that, right? Because that does happen. If you try to, what's one of the reasons why we're afraid sometimes to own our side of things, or own up to things, to difficult people, or difficult conversations, because there were You know how they're going to respond. You know it's going to end up in gaslighting, bad you, etc. But you literally can use your listening and talking boundaries in these situations and say something along the lines of, hey, you know what? I already took ownership for that. I'll apologize maybe one more time because, hey, yeah, that was out of alignment for me. But I didn't come here to take responsibility for the whole thing. I came here to take responsibility for my side. Okay? And you can leave it at that. Okay? Because here's the thing, understanding what kind of person you're dealing with can help you set the right type of boundaries. Sometimes people will come back at you even after you've taken ownership of something simply because what happened really hurt them and they really want you to understand how much it hurt them and they're not sure how to convey it. But there's also the side of people who really just want you to take responsibility for all of it. And we're going to show you how to tell the difference, okay? So let's talk about narcissists and avoidance because not every difficult person is the same. Avoidants often show up kind of like with narcissistic tendencies. They're distant, very uncomfortable with vulnerability, emotionally walled off, but the difference here is they actually do care. They care about the relationship, they care about you, they actually do love you, right? And down deep inside of themselves, that is part of their core. They're just really, really scared. And so it's more like the scared kitten syndrome where they're gonna you, right? When you know you're trying, when you're trying to help them or you're trying to connect with them, but they feel so like vulnerability is so scary for them that they fight back because vulnerability equals uh, a life or death matter to them, right? In their brain, in their amygdala. So they might shut down, they blame shift in the moment, avoid responsibility, but over time they really do grow if they're willing. But narcissists, on the other hand, they're not just scared, they're also entitled. They feel entitled to your mind, your body, your choices, everything. They really don't want a relationship, they want control. They don't want to come around. They try to twist, confuse, isolate you. They try to make you feel like you're the problem because they refuse to take any accountability for anything. And so that's why knowing who you are is the key because both avoidance and narcissists will attack your sense of self, but only one will ever really reconnect with you after you hold your ground, while the other one will love bomb you and then go right back to what they were doing to keep you confused, thinking that, okay, well, they finally changed, right? If you have a good sense of self, you also know to watch. You don't trust love bombing because an avoidant can love bomb too, but eventually they really do try to make the differences to keep you in their lives. Whereas to a narcissist, you may as well be driftwood, right? So here's 3 boundaries that you need to set with difficult people. And number 1, the first boundary, and remember, boundaries are the things that we keep with ourselves. These are the things that we are able to act upon no matter what. Okay? It's not what we put with someone else. It's literally how we choose to show up. So the first boundary is know yourself. Straight up. Before you ever engage with a difficult person, you need to be rooted in who you are and what you believe in and how you believe in yourself. Because remember, people don't behave above their self-beliefs, right? And if your perception is the one that matters the most, Everybody else's perception of you is an opinion. The difference here is you can listen to their feedback and see if you've got really high ownership, and see how their feedback is either true, untrue, or where you need more information, right? That's that listening boundary. You're going to use that in this case, right? And if you've got a high sense of worth, a high sense of self, and you know, love, like, and trust yourself, you can take the ownership, and like if there is something in that feedback where you're like, oh, actually that does make sense, you can call yourself to the carpet and be like, okay, you know what? That was out of alignment. I completely agree. Here's how I'm going to change it. But if you can ask yourself, like, what part of me feels small or unworthy in this interaction? What am I trying to prove? And this, because this is about identity, right? When you know who you are, you're not easily swayed by manipulation, guilt, or shame tactics, which is sometimes what narcissists or even avoidance, like I said, will do when you come to them with this ownership. But if you have this high sense of self-worth, you can immediately say, that one's not true. I'm not going to own that, right? And you can distinguish that and say, that's not something I need to own. I came to own this and this alone. That's it, right? Okay. Remember though, like, the difference here is a narcissist will also try to destroy your sense of worth, because they know that if they can do that, if they can destroy your sense of worth, they're going to have the ability to control your mind. And that's what they're after. And if they can control your mind, they can control your actions. But an avoidant, they're not necessarily after control necessarily. It's just that fear of vulnerability that's stopping them. So what I want you to do, if you're, is sit down and really ask yourself, like, how does God see me? Because he's not going to see you imperfectly. He's going to see that you have imperfections, but to him, you were already created perfectly. He didn't make a mistake when he created you. He creates perfection, right? Now that doesn't mean that we do everything perfectly, because and the reason why is because we don't understand ourselves the way he does, right? But it makes sense to start asking how he sees us, because we will start to understand ourselves that way. We will start to understand our mission and purpose that way. And we will start to understand the person that God created when he created us and respect that person that way. This is how perfection is actually achieved. It is not never doing anything wrong ever again. It is through understanding ourselves as this divine creation. And that comes by piece upon piece, precept upon precept, step upon step, baby step upon baby step, right? And that's how we find our sense of self-worth. So give it a try. I want you to take like a piece of paper out and really seriously start having like a prayer with God, and write what comes to your heart. Lord, what do you see when you see me? And anything that is beautiful and good, write that down. He might say, yeah, you've got some work to do, but he's never going to shame you. He's never going to throw guilt upon you. When God chastises, it's exciting because it brings us closer to who we truly are. And that is an exciting thing. So again, let's also bring up the listening boundary. This is the second boundary. So finding your self-worth is the first boundary. Setting and doing the listening boundary, like really, really leaning into the listening boundary is going to be the second boundary that you want to use with a difficult person or a difficult conversation. But this is just kind of where it gets nuanced. Don't give everyone full access to your attention or your full attention, I should say. See, with avoidance, your listening might help them feel safe enough to return, but don't overextend your empathy. Don't sit in a toxic monologue because you can get into over-explaining. And a good boundary, if you remember, isn't about over-explaining. It's about understanding, right? It's about understanding where the other person is coming from. And this is why the listening boundary is so powerful here, is because when you really, really hear them, you can ask them questions about like pieces that you don't understand or holes that come from their argument. Now, that gives them the opportunity to clarify, but if they refuse to clarify, well, down deep inside it, down behind all of that is kind of a where you see that vulnerability, where you see that fear, whether they're afraid of um, being vulnerable with you because it's been attacked so many times, or whether or not they try to talk you in circles, right? And make it your fault, your fault, your fault. You don't want to overextend your empathy for this reason, you know? Because even with an avoidant, saying something, oh, and we'll get into the talking boundary because that's the third boundary here. But when you listen and you say, and you're hearing what they're saying, but it sounds manipulative, it sounds controlling, it sounds like blame shifting, right? You can say that. This is really interesting. I really want to understand you. But the way that I'm hearing things, it sounds blame shifting. It sounds controlling and kind of manipulative with what you're coming up with. Just simply saying that out loud, yeah, it might trigger them. Yes, it might get them mad. But you're at least standing in the truth. And eventually, if the person's really an avoidant, they'll come back and they'll say, I did not mean to shift blame or to sound manipulative or controlling. Just, it was a really, really hard concept for me and I needed space. Okay? And you can even say that too. It sounds like you need some space right now. That's another really good way to use your listening and your talking boundary when trying to understand. Because remember, again, that people communicate in their words, their actions, and their deeds. They may say one thing and do something completely different. Okay? And a narcissist, this is one way you can actually also tell the difference between a narcissist and avoidant. A narcissist, they'll say one thing, but their actions and their energy say something completely different. Whereas with an avoidant, they may say one thing, but their actions and their energy often do come back to what they say. They might be a little bit scattered and they might be a little bit off because they're confused and they're scared. But eventually those three things will come back into alignment. Okay? So with narcissists, listening turns into fuel for their control. So if you listen to discern, not to absorb, you're not a sponge, you are legitimately a child of God. So set the limit. I'll engage if this stays respectful. When it turns chaotic, you exit gracefully. Hey, again, I just think it sounds like we both need some space. Okay? And stay the course. They might come after you. They might blame. They might call you names. They might tell you you're being a coward, etc. You don't have to believe that's true. And you can look in your intention and say, I'm not exiting for any of those reasons. I'm exiting because this conversation is not going anywhere. and I'm going to stand for myself. I'm going to stand for them. I'm out. Okay. And then third, lastly, the talking boundary. You don't owe anyone a full explanation of anything. Okay. With avoidance, short, clearer statements help. Here's what I need. I want to work through this, and I'm here when you're ready. With narcissists, though, explanations are traps. They'll twist your words, they'll use them to guilt trip you, to gaslight you. So when you speak with clarity and finality without over explaining it. The shorter, the better. So an example of this is, hey, this isn't up for debate. I'm not asking for your permission. I am just making you aware. Something like that, right? Protect your voice. You need to speak your truth and not get into defense, okay? So let's talk about like how this also shows up literally everywhere, not just in your difficult relationships with family or with friends, but it also can show up in difficult relationships in your profession as well, whether it be with a boss, coworkers, clients, etc. It does show up. So if you don't know how to set these 3 boundaries, you're going to keep questioning yourself, and that costs way more than money. It costs you your time, your clarity, sometimes your calling, your sanity, your energy. Oh, we already said energy, but it costs you way more than it's worth. And it will show up financially for you, but it also show up in how you start to feel inside of your body. So if you're getting that bone deep exhaustion, you just even talking to somebody, you might want to ask yourself why. And listen to what it's saying. Because when you know your boundaries, you stop apologizing for being strong. And you start showing up with unshakable peace, knowing who you are and being unapologetic about it. Because remember, again, if you know yourself, you love yourself, you like yourself, you don't need somebody else to affirm to you what you are. Okay? So if this episode is helpful, if it hit home for you, I want to invite you to go deeper inside the unbreakable boundary. Inside this program, I'm going to teach you how to identify emotional manipulation before it spirals and what to do with it. Build boundaries based upon truth, not your trauma, and feel safe, seen, and spiritually strong around anyone, even the difficult ones. So if you would like that, I'm going to invite you to go to www.erinanderson/coaching.com/the unbreakable boundary. And I will also post a link in the description below. So if you'd like that, please feel free to go get started on that immediately. Your boundaries aren't just protection. They are about you positioning yourself for life, business, God's calling for you, how you decide to build your life, and how you decide to show up in integrity. That is literally what these boundaries are about. You're not too much, you're not crazy. With the right boundaries, you can stop surviving people and start leading in life, your life, for the better. All right, my loves. So that's it for this week. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to message the show. Like I said, go to www.erinanderson-coaching.com if you guys would like to reach out to me. Or you can also email me at erinanderson@erinanderson-coaching.com. If you guys have questions or if you have anything that you'd like me to post on the show. All right, my loves, until next week, I'll see you soon. Bye.
Alright, Boundary Boss Babes. I'm super excited that you tuned in with me today. Make sure you tune in again next week as we chat about more Boundary Boss Babe topics. We're going to get into so many other things about how to set boundaries with your business, how to set boundaries with your relationships, so you can truly have the time, the money, and the flexibility that you are seeking. So tune in next week. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast. Let your other Boss Babe friends know about it. And also, if you've got any questions, make sure you submit them into the podcast by clicking on the send us a text message at the bottom of the podcast description. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. See you later, Boss Babes.